Welcome to Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmedicke. It is Monday, so it is time to react to the Broncos' 10-9 win over the New York Jets on Sunday in rainy MetLife Stadium. So I'm joined, of course, by Chris Thomason. Chris, how are you today?
Greetings from New Jersey. I'm still here, but back in Denver tonight.
Weather better yet?
Oh, yeah, it's delightful and sunny. PJ Locke was saying he was looking forward to getting back to Denver so he could see some sun, but one day too late here. He's got it.
It's beautiful here. And Kyle Fredrickson is also with us. Kyle, how are you today?
I am doing almost as well as the Broncos winning two games on this road trip. Do you remember when we were joking after week two that they might not win until the Panthers game? So hopefully our analysis is a little smarter from here on out.
Yes. Well, I would also like to say I'm the only one on this podcast who picked them on Sunday. So,
Bravo,
and I'm the
bravo.
only one in our whole group thing that picked them. I'm the only one in our NFL picks. I'm the only one who picked them, and in our Broncos predictions, I'm the only one who picked them. So
Ooh, all
you get
right.
lucky every once in a while. So let's. But I want to start, guys. And Kyle, you sent me this text yesterday afternoon saying, "I'm confused. Is this team actually good?" And so I'm going to start with that. And Chris, I'm going to go to you. Are you confused? Are they good? Are they confusingly good? What are the Denver Broncos?
Well, it's crazy. It's the opposite of Sean Payton's glory days, kind of in New Orleans, because he always was based on a strong offense, Hall of Famer Drew Brees, and now the offense is mediocre, to put it kindly. But this defense is just amazing. It's confounding how they just keep getting better day after day, game after game. 12 sacks now in the last two games, and I think unless they have injuries, that's a positive. I mean, because defense usually shows up more consistently than perhaps offense does, and yeah, it's realistic to think. I mean, it's too early to think they're going to be in the playoffs, but it's realistic to think that they'll still be alive in December.
So, Kyle, have you figured out anything since we last talked yesterday afternoon?
I did some soul searching since my text after that game, and that was mostly just due to the bizarre nature of
Yes.
that game, too, right? And when you look at it as a whole, defense won that game for the Broncos. It was really incredible what they were able to do against Aaron Rodgers, providing that pressure when Rodgers looked kind of vintage QB there for some of those series and evading the rush, but the Broncos flustered him. They won that game, but in the moment, Bo Nix and the first half looked so bad.
Yeah.
And you can blame the rain. It's easy to sort of write that off as, it's weather, it got to him. But this guy played in the Pac-12. I'm guessing he played in some rainy conditions in his career. It was just really bizarre how he couldn't get the ball downfield, -7 passing yards at halftime. But you can't count this guy out, right? I think the one thing we've learned about Bo Nix is that no matter the situation, it seems like he approaches it the same every time, right? Like Sean Payton has been kind of balking at questions about his confidence. And I think that's really just due to the fact that he views this guy like he's an NFL vet and he really kind of handles his business in the same way. So a lot of flaws on this team, but the fact that they went out and won these two road games with such a young group, going out to West Virginia, for all the flack that Sean Payton got, you look at sort of what their strategy was for this series of games, and it's really hard to ask for any better of a coaching job when you consider the outcome.
Well, Chris, do you think that staying in West Virginia, did that help the Broncos? I mean, did it really give them just kind of that team bonding moment?
I don't know. Everybody was saying that before they went, when they were there, afterward, team bonding, the company line and that kind of stuff. But by far the better of the two road games on the trip was Tampa Bay, and that had nothing to do with West Virginia. They flew out there 2 days prior to the game, as Sean Payton likes to do for Eastern time zone games. And if the Broncos had lost to the Jets, in which they came very close to doing, the talk would have been, I mean, this was horrible. This was ugly. Why did they waste a week in West Virginia? But now you can spin it like, well, the whole trip was great. Two road wins in West Virginia in between. And can Sean Payton sell that to the owner next year to pony up another million or whatever it costs to train at the Greenbrier? We'll see. I mean, he'll just tell him, "Hey, we went 2-0, and They've got 4 East Coast games next season, and they'll probably petition the league again to have 2 in a row. Who knows? Maybe they'll ask the league to have all 4 in a row, and then they can practice 3 straight weeks at the Greenbrier.
Well,
Sean could fit in a lot of golf over that time too.
yeah, yeah, that's I know the Greenbrier has a pretty nice golf course there. I know that. All right, so let's dive deep more into this defense because it has been unbelievable pretty much all season, even in the first 2 losses. They were great against Seattle. Seattle got hot late. Pittsburgh really did nothing in the second half, and now these 2 games back to back. And Kyle, they had an interesting thing on TV, and I think we've written about it too. They have 1 first-round pick on this defense, and that's Patrick Surtain. The rest of the guys are lower draft picks or undrafted guys. And we wrote about, it's been 53 weeks since the 70-20 debacle. What has Vance Joseph changed with this group?
It's just really impressive. You have to start with the personnel, the front seven and the pass rush that this team is getting. I mean, it's 16 sacks through these 4 games. That's second in the NFL behind the Vikings. And Chris asked a great question to Sean on the teleconference this morning, which is, what is it like when those sacks are coming from everywhere? Because, you'll remember it's PJ Locke really making the game clinching sack coming out of the secondary against Rodgers, a guy who's really one of the best in the league at identifying where those rushes are coming from and then making changes to adapt to it. So I think that's the source of their strength right now. And that's Zach Allen, maybe being one of the most, disruptive defensive linemen through the entire NFL to start this season. But it's also great coverage, right? I think a lot of those sacks are coming from the pass rushers having quite a bit of time. And we talk about Pat Surtain every week. To me, Riley Moss just continues to prove that he's that guy on the other side. He's up to the challenge, especially when you hold Aaron Rodgers without a passing touchdown. That, I just don't think any of us would have predicted that going into this game, that they would be that dominant. So a lot of things clicking. And, we got to say that even without Alex Singleton in there, with Cody Barton having the green dot, all that communication is going through a different person's mouth. So the fact that they are able to do that with all those adjustments, with Justin Sternad plugged in there, a guy who hasn't started since 2021. I mean, you can't say enough good things about what they're doing. And hats off to Vance Joseph. I think the scheme has been part of it in terms of when the Broncos have rushed, when they've dropped in coverage, just all the ways they've been able to disguise what they're doing. They confuse Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's simple as that.
Well, and Chris, I was going to ask you, the first play of the game, Vance blitzes Sternad. I don't think the Jets saw that. They had Rodgers confused except for maybe those 2-3 drives.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, he had not started a game since October of 2021. He had not played a regular season snap from scrimmage since December 2021. And then you throw him in there. I mean, Peyton during the week was very mum. He wouldn't say anything about how he was going to use his linebackers. So he wanted to keep it a secret that Justin was starting. So he keeps it a secret that he's starting, and then boom, as soon as he does, it's a design play for him. And it was pretty stunning. There's no doubt about it.
And Chris, Kyle was talking about the pass rush and the coverage, but I think a lot has started with this defense is they are just better against the run this year than they ever were last season.
Yeah, they get John Franklin Myers, they get Malcolm Roach helping out, and Zach Allen is even better than he was last season. I mean, he's talked about being more comfortable and that sort of thing. And Chris Harris Jr., I was talking to last week, said he's playing at an all-pro, Pro Bowl level. And then DJ Jones, the underrated guy who is out of the limelight, hardly ever speaks to the media, doesn't like the media, just comes and does his job. And, he was on some very good 49ers teams, consummate veteran, and he's just kind of been the unsung hero, anchoring things down at nose tackle.
John Franklin Myers probably enjoyed that game a little bit yesterday, didn't you think, Kyle?
Oh yeah. Sacking Rodgers probably felt pretty good. I mean, that whole saga is amazing with how the Broncos benefited from a lot of, Jets and now Eagles dysfunction. But I'll just to add one more note, this is a great tackling team, right? Like how
Yes.
many times have you watched a game and been like, ooh, that's a bust, or oh, that's a bad angle. This team just is technically sound and they are executing at such a high level. And they've done it against some pretty good quarterback play. I think as they come back to play the Raiders, it might get a little easier. We'll see.
Well, and I think Bronco fans should probably be happy because Baker then torched the Eagles yesterday.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that kind of showed how legit that performance was last week. And something I want to ask kind of both of you about, and Kyle, I'll go to you first, is Brandon Jones. We haven't really talked about him very much. The guy makes plays. He is replacing Justin Simmons, which is not easy. Simmons is a, Bronco, I don't know if he's an icon, but a big part of the franchise from the past. I mean, what have you seen from him?
Yeah, I've been really impressed. Enjoyed talking with him in the locker room. Is just a guy who gives you thoughtful answers and is willing to share his time. I've talked with him several times now. And what impresses me is the communication and the fact that he didn't play in the preseason
Right.
and he's out there making plays. He's involved in two key turnovers in each of these last two games with Riley Moss enforcing and fumbling or in recovering fumbles. And it's sort of that blend of just smarts and physicality, right? We haven't seen a whole lot of interceptions from this secondary. The linebackers group, I know Singleton had one in the opener. It's been a lot of forced fumbles to this point. But I think you think about how this whole defense is playing. There's just so many different guys contributing, and so yeah, we'll see if that can continue.
The interception thing is interesting, but I don't think quarterbacks have anywhere to throw against this secondary right now. Do you feel that way, Chris?
Well, it all works in concert. I mean, the defensive line is providing a great pass rush. The secondary has proven to be much better than anybody anticipated. I mean, that was one of the major question marks entering the season on the Broncos. Riley Moss, who barely played last season as a rookie, thrown in there, and he's been solid so far. Brandon Jones didn't play in any of the preseason games due to a hamstring injury, so there were some questions surrounding him, and he's been top notch. And even PJ Locke, I mean, he had a solid season last year, but he hadn't really done it over the long haul. He played pretty much because Kareem Jackson was getting suspended about every week. So, yeah, the secondary has, I mean, I'm not going to go so far as to say that this is the no-fly zone
No,
sequel,
no.
but the secondary has been much better than expected.
And the broadcast actually raved about Jaquan McMillan too when during the
Yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah. Let's throw him out. I mean, I talked to him last week, and he reiterated that his goal is to be first team All Pro slot cornerback because the Associated Press, which has the official All Pro team, added that to the defense last year.
Yeah, and talk about a good tackler for being not the biggest guy in the world. He made some good tackles yesterday for sure. All right, let's flip over to the offense. And we're not going to go to Bo Nix yet. Let's talk about the running game. We're going to stay positive. Kyle, Javonte Williams, little resurgence game. We haven't really seen that from him, but he seemed to be a very confident back yesterday.
Yeah, I thought that this run game really responded well to that Tyler Bidet injury, right? Like
Yeah.
that was pretty scary. We got an update from Sean Payton. Apparently, Bidet is doing a lot better. He flew commercially back to Denver. Seems like a situation where we shouldn't be surprised if he gets put on IR. But when anytime a guy has to be immobilized and put on a cart, you get a little nervous. So good news on that front. And the Broncos didn't flinch, right? I think especially after halftime they were committed to running the ball. The rain stopped a little bit. And all of a sudden, we were seeing like these 10 and 8 yard gains on first and second down, right? And that totally transforms what this offense is capable of when that team has to respect the run on early downs. Because then you saw the whole offense open up and Cortland Sutton and Nix really establishing that connection. But give credit to Javonte Williams, right? I think everyone was sort of dogging on him after a lot of hype in the preseason and him not really showing up. And it wasn't like 100 yard gain, right? Like it wasn't some breakout huge performance. But when you combine it with what McLaughlin did and with the carry split, being 25, total between those two guys and going for 123 yards, I mean, that's a winning formula. And it's another week of good offensive line play, right? It seemed like that group was as disjointed as any after those first two games, but all of a sudden they've stacked two solid performances, where yeah, 10 points isn't a lot, but Bo Nix doesn't get sacked for the second game in a row. So that whole front group there, the running back combination, even if Bidet has to head on IR, the Broncos gotta love where they sit right now.
Yeah, and Chris, I was going to go to the offensive line next. They've just, like you said, Kyle, Nix hasn't been sacked in 2 weeks. They're starting to run the ball better. Was this just a matter of kind of, and now Mike McGlinchey's out, so you've got another tackle in there. But was this just a matter of kind of these guys just coming together, kind of figuring it out on the fly a little bit more?
Yeah, a little bit. Quinn Miners gave an interesting interview in West Virginia where he admitted he was putting too much pressure on himself. He signs this huge contract extension. He's named a captain for the first time, and he's kind of like not a vocal type guy, a low key type guy, and he had to adjust to that. And he's really stepped up the last two games. And then Alex Palchowski, Palcho, I mean, he's done a fine job stepping in for Mike McGlinchey. And, overall, that's one thing that the Broncos have been able to do is just plug guys in when they've had these injuries so far. We talked about Justin Sternad stepping in for Alex Singleton, and then now you got Palcho at right tackle. So, yeah, it was just a matter of the offensive line kind of coming together. And if I could make one comment on Javonte Williams, I had a nice interview with him after the game yesterday. He's got a very kind of low-key type of confidence. I mean, he admitted he hears people saying things like he doesn't have it anymore, and he said flat out, well, I got to go out and show him I still have it. And he had a solid outing yesterday. I mean, and that comes after dating back to last season that he had 13 consecutive games averaging less than 4 yards per carry, and 6 out of the last 7 averaging less than 3 yards per carry. Finally got up to 4.8, and with Tyler Bidet hurt, Javonte is going to have to keep that up, coupled with the play of McLaughlin.
All right, let's switch to Mr. Bo Nix. -7 yards at halftime, ends up with 60. That was his first touchdown pass. I mean, bold strategy by the Jets to not cover Cortland Sutton on that play. He was open for 10 yards. I don't know what they were doing on that play. But Kyle, the Broncos are not losing confidence in this guy. And, Sean Payton had the comment, I believe our Mark Kisler may have asked that question in the presser yesterday. I'm not 100% sure about you should go out to dinner with him or something, Sean Payton said. But, I mean, I guess the Broncos are just ready to ride with this, for a lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if Sean's serious about that invite, I think me and CT would take him up on it, right? Like, I'll even let Bo pick the restaurant. I don't care. That would be amazing access. But no, they're gonna ride with it. They know there's gonna be bumps along the way, but the way that this guy handles adversity it's worthy of praise. And that goes back to his college career. I mean, we don't got to summarize everything that this guy's been through, but it hasn't been a smooth sailing to this point in his football career. But boy, it looked so ugly in that first half. And I touched on it, but he couldn't get the ball downfield. And, you got the announcers basically saying, why isn't this guy trying to wear a glove? Or why are the Broncos not adjusting to this? Because at that point, it was miserable how poorly he played. And I did think it was pretty good how Nix owned up to it, reading the post-game comments. He said, hey, going into halftime, rain or not, like I had to play better. And to his credit, he did. And we touched on the running game, but that gave this offense balance and it gave them just enough mojo to get one touchdown drive. Because that's all it took in this game, right? Like that's a really good Jets defense that the Broncos team played. I think when we look back at the season, even with some of the Jets' dysfunction, that's going to be one of the better groups in the league. And so, you win ugly when you have to, and that's what the Broncos did. So, we'll see if this is going to be enough against teams with better offenses and teams that maybe figure out how to break this Broncos defense. So far, no one's really figured out how to do that. But CT mentioned it to start. This isn't the formula, right? Like Sean Payton hasn't won like this before, but credit to him for looking at his personnel, understanding how he has to play to win, and then executing that game plan. He really takes offense anytime a reporter compares this team to any other team, especially last year. And there's some truth in that because this group is so much different on a personnel standpoint, just the way they're playing. And I think a belief that, this franchise that's so used to losing actually has something going right now.
Well, and Chris, this is probably one of the youngest teams Sean Payton's ever had. And, I think he's willing to see it grow. Do you get that feeling?
Yeah, I definitely think so. These are his handpicked guys. I mean, roughly 2/3 of them have been brought in since Sean Payton took over as coach, and the ones he didn't bring in are darn good, or else they would have already been out the door. So, yeah, he likes that aspect. And if I can make one comment about Nix, who certainly is the rookie quarterback, the most encouraging thing, I mean, even when he struggles, he finishes well. He gets better as the game goes on. I mean, look at the Seattle game. He was terrible, and then he led them to a late score, and it was a one-possession game. And same with Pittsburgh, led him to some late scores when he was terrible and was better at the end, and then was better at the end Sunday, and it finally resulted in a victory. So as uneven at times as Nix's play has been, it's encouraging that there's usually been an upward trend in games for him.
Chris, what did you think of those play calls late, though? Like having him kind of roll out, and he did throw that one ball. Was that a little weird? Like when
Yeah,
they
there
were
were
trying
some
to hold the
interesting
lead
play
there?
calls. The one where they could have gotten a first down late in the game that would have wrapped things up before Will Lutz missed the 50-yard field goal, kind of rolling Nix around when a lot of people were at the line of scrimmage anyway, putting your quarterback in harm's way. That was kind of a strange play, and it was almost semi conceding. Let's just force him into another timeout and kick the field goal because Lutz is automatic. Well, he wasn't automatic. He missed. And even if he had made it, it still would have been a 4-point game, and they would have had time to score a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, 50 yards in the rain and that conditions, like even though, yeah, that was a tough field goal. And we saw them both miss it. The Jets missed theirs too. So, all right, the Broncos come back home and host two AFC West opponents. Real quick on the AFC West, Chiefs are 4-0. They're going to have like a point differential of 4. I don't know. They just keep winning these close games. And everybody else is 2-2. So, chance for the Broncos to kind of, these are two opponents the next 2 weeks. Don't you guys think that probably the Broncos, they should split at least, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean it's been hard to predict, I guess. We didn't expect this road swing to go as well as it did, and you would figure that coming back home, the Broncos are going to be super confident. That fan base that, left the home opener sort of shaking their heads and like, is this another season of just misery? Is going to be juiced up after those games. So yeah, I don't think that it's unreasonable to think that they would split or maybe win both of these games. But the more tape on Bo Nix, the more defenses he's going to see. Is weather going to continue to be a factor for this guy? I think that's one thing maybe long term we look at with their investment in Nix is he's going to have to play in some cold, wet climates in Denver. And what we saw, this last week, I don't think is super inspiring. I will say with the way the weather is in Denver right now, it's probably going to be dry for a while.
Yeah.
But sort of something to consider as we move on here. But they say defense wins championships. It also wins games. And right now, if opponents can't score a touchdown on this group, it makes Bo Nix and the whole offense, their life so much easier, taking that pressure off that they really only have to be close to perfect on 1 or 2 drives. And it seems like they're going to be in games.
I want to switch gears really quick. And Chris, I wanted to ask you about this. I don't know if you guys both saw, but the Dikembe Mutombo passed away this morning. Chris, you covered the NBA for a long time. Any Dikembe run-ins, interviews, any stories like that?
Maybe not any great stories. I didn't cover him when he played for the Nuggets, but interviewed him a number of times when he was playing with other teams, namely the Houston Rockets late in his career. And, every year I would do the annual for the Rocky Mountain News, how old Mutombo is, how many more years is he going to play, because he played till he was 40 plus. even though he was averaging like 1 or 2 points per game. But he was just such a great locker room guy and just a total class guy, humanitarian. It was just great listening to him talk in the locker room, maybe the 4 or 5 times I talked to him with his booming voice and all of that. And he just had so much wisdom to younger players. I read some of the tributes today, and it's quite an unfortunate loss.
Yeah, it's a loss of a Nuggets legend. That's I mean, I don't know, I can't. How many teams did he end up playing for? It had to be like 7 or 8, right? Something close to that. I mean,
Denver, Atlanta, Philly, Houston. Another one in there, probably.
yeah.
I would think he'll be remembered as a Nugget, though, right? I mean, you see so many of those retro 55 jerseys at Nuggets games. He was iconic. The finger wave. I think a lot of people, that was kind of his gesture after making a big block, and that's part of pop culture. So, RIP, a guy who's a legend for sure.
Well, and now with the Nuggets having a title, but the other most iconic image is him laying on the floor in Seattle.
Right, yeah. I mean,
So,
the first 8/1 seed in the NBA playoffs. That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Well, all right, guys, we'll dive into the Raiders later in the week. It is Raider week. I don't know if that matters anymore. I think that's going to be a question when we talk on Friday, if Broncos Raiders matters as much anymore. These guys have plenty of coverage over at denvergazette.com of yesterday's win and the week going forward. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple or on Spotify, and you can hear Kyle, Chris, and myself break down the Raiders later in the week. Thanks for coming on, guys. We'll talk to you then.
Let's do it.